Yeah, just so you folks know, we're gonna get to talking about a story. And along the way, we might spoil some plot points for you. If that is, you haven't read the book yet. Remember, folks, sometimes red is better.
You'll love what we've got in store for you this December on the Hallmark Channel.
Elizabeth Rogan goes to a terrific college.
I think I aced it!
She has a terrific roommate.
Will wonders never cease?
And a terrific boyfriend.
Marry me, Liz.
You might say that her life is pretty terrific.
What in the world?
But there's something missing. Even though she doesn't know what it is. But when Edwin Jackson Hamner steps into her life,
I've been watching you.
she's about to discover that everything she thought she wanted wasn't what she needed.
You need a strawberry double dip cone.
They could be the perfect match. The only problem is her boyfriend, Tony.
Liz?
But this guy won't be a problem for long, because Tony is crushed between a dump truck and a Fiat.
Ouch!
Anyway, Elizabeth has the perfect man to comfort her while she grieves.
You've been through a lot and you need to get your strength back.
Because Ed always shows up at just the right time.
I know what you need.
And soon, Elizabeth knows that Ed is the one.
I love you, Edward!
But what she doesn't know is that they didn't meet in college. Ed has been in love with her since the 2nd grade.
You're pretty.
That's when he secretly clipped a lock of her hair. What? And then read up on voodoo and dark spells from the Necronomicon? And that's just the beginning of all the dark secrets that Elizabeth Rogan will uncover this holiday season in I Know What You Need. Stephen King's classic romance this Christmas on the Hallmark Channel. Whew, that got dark. Alright, you're not going to find Edward Hamner on the Hallmark Channel. He is a creepy stalker who uses dark magic to manipulate his victim, as well as voodoo to murder anyone who gets in his way. But do those things alone make him the irredeemable villain that he is? Tonight, constant reader, we will be comparing Edward Hamner to other characters who have committed equally heinous crimes, and yet they get a pass from most audience members. So, let's find out what makes Edward so repulsive by diving into Stephen King's 1976 story, I Know What You Need. The short story I Know What You Need from 1976 marks a slight change in Stephen King's career as a writer of short fiction, because this story was published in Cosmopolitan instead of the usual men's magazine like Cavalier or Gallery. And it makes sense because by '76, King had experienced mainstream success with novels like Carrie and Salem's Lot. Tonight, I would like the book club to consider the character Edward Jackson Hamner. There are a lot of reasons as to why we might view him as the bad guy, but they might not be the right reasons. Some might consider him a villain right away because of his creepy physical details. He has dark eyes, dark hair, he's skinny, he wears a green army fatigue jacket, he's short, kind of nerdy. But for the most part, this is a lot like Stephen King as a teenager, with the exception of height. Stephen King is quite tall. So what about Edward? Well, many argue that Edward is a stalker, because he has been keeping tabs on Elizabeth since elementary school. And yet there are plenty of romances and romantic comedies in which characters have a long-standing crush watching them from afar. So here is a more obvious reason. Edward secretly uses magical powers in order to know the thoughts and manipulate the feelings of our protagonist Elizabeth. That is creepy. But here's the thing. Edward Hamner is not the only character to use such powers. The love spell trope dates back before the age of Shakespeare. In 1958's Bell, Book and Candle, Kim Novak's bewitching character uses black magic to make Jimmy Stewart's character fall in love with her, even though he already has a fiancée. We, the audience, know that she is using deception, trickery, magic to get what she wants, and yet most audiences are still rooting for these two to get together by the end of the movie. Like it or not, deception is a staple of romantic comedies. In The Music Man, shifty salesman Harold Hill travels from one town to the next, seducing one sadder and wiser girl after another, until, that is, he meets his match with Marion the librarian. With both characters, when the truth comes out, they genuinely regret their dishonesty. That is not the case with Edward. We don't see character growth, so the character remains creepy in the eyes of the audience. In some cases, the plot of I Know What You Need reminds me of a 2001 film with Mel Gibson called What Women Want. Thanks to a freak accident involving electricity and a lot of beauty products, our main character gains the power to read the minds of women. In the early stages of the film, he uses this ability to manipulate his way into Marissa Tomei's bed. But by the end of the film, Mel Gibson learns empathy and respect for women.
It's a embarrassment to me. You look like a on heat.
I mean, Mel Gibson's character learns empathy and respect for women. In contrast, Ed isn't interested in a one-night stand. He is in this for the long haul, and he seems very patient as he lures Elizabeth into the relationship. In short, he's using power, and that power corrupts him. And yet there are characters that are corrupted by this type of power that do not become villains or anti-heroes. Take Bill Murray's character, Phil Connors, from Groundhog Day. Without character growth, a film like Groundhog Day could have become as sinister as a Stephen King story. Phil Connors lives the same day over and over again, allowing him to learn intimate details about the people of Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. And sometimes he uses that magic-based knowledge to take advantage of people like Nancy Taylor.
Nancy, she works in the dress shop and makes noises like a chipmunk when she gets real excited.
Hey!
It's true.
In the same way Edward lures Elizabeth into the bedroom, Phil Connors detects what Nancy wants/needs and wins her heart.
This is going to seem sudden, but... Nancy, will you be my wife?
Oh, Phil.
But then, of course, for Phil, everything resets the next morning. So, no harm, no foul? Question mark? But there is change. When Phil Connors sets his sights on Andie MacDowell's character Rita, he spends an unknown amount of days trying to unlock every one of her desires so that he can shape himself into her ideal man. He finds out her favorite drink, her favorite type of poetry. It's a lot of trial and error, and he almost succeeds in going to bed with her. But something is off, and Rita knows it.
Stop it.
Phil finally takes a step back. After getting slapped in the face, perhaps an almost infinite amount of times, Phil finally takes a step back and eventually lets go of his obsession with Rita. And he then makes the best of his situation by discovering ways to make himself happy and purposeful. It would seem that the most obvious factor that makes Edward a villain is that he uses his powers to cause the death of his parents, as well as the car crash that ends the life of Tony, Elizabeth's boyfriend. But for some readers and audience members, even murder isn't a deal breaker. Take, for example, the musical version of The Phantom of the Opera. This masked anti-hero strangles two people and drops a chandelier on the stage. But many fans still love him and still long for him to win the girl at the end. So why did the Phantom get a pass and not Eddie? Why does one earn our sympathy and the other our revulsion? Edward is manipulative, he is murderous, and he is also disingenuous. He has been hiding his true self the entire time. When she finally sneaks into Edward's place, all by herself, that is when she realizes that it feels more like a movie set, a facade. When she sneaks into his place and opens up the closet door, she gets a glimpse of the real Ed. It's not neat and tidy like the rest of the place. As Elizabeth snoops around, she recalls the story of Bluebeard's wife. Bluebeard is a 17th century folk tale about a woman married to a 6-time widower who provides her with everything she wants and needs on one condition: she must not open this door. But while he's away, the curious bride opens up the door to discover the corpses of Bluebeard's 6 other wives. And when her husband finds out what she's done, he plans to make her corpse number 7. Don't worry, everything turns out fine for her. After all, this is a kid's fairy tale. But back to Elizabeth Rogan. When she opens up that closet door in Edward's home, she discovers dreadful things not meant for her eyes. Voodoo doll paraphernalia, and several mystical books, including the Necronomicon, a fictional ancient text which first appeared in the 1924 short story The Hound by H.P. Lovecraft. But for a static villain character such as Edward Hamner, he reacts in a way that shows the banality of his character. Here is what he says: "You ungrateful bitch." You may have heard that phrase in another thriller about an equally manipulative antagonist that promises to fulfill all the wants and needs of a female protagonist. In the film Megan, we meet a prototype android that is designed to be a best friend and companion of an adolescent girl named Katie. Throughout the film, Megan is very protective and possessive of her ward. She is willing to kill off anyone that bullies or threatens Katie. But when she learns the terrible truth of what Megan has done, the heartless android says this:
"You ungrateful little bitch."
So it doesn't matter if the character is male, female, robot. If there's no transformation and only petty disdain, then the audience will likely cheer when the villain is vanquished. Earlier this month, I asked if our book club members had ever encountered a person like Edward in their lives. Here's what some of them had to say about being in relationships with manipulative people. Keep in mind their words are real, but their voices are not.
I was married 3 years to a man who I thought had lost both his parents years before we met. My brother-in-law and his wife were visiting. Everything seemed normal until my brother-in-law's wife said, "Well, I know I'll never trust to cash a check from her." And they all stopped and looked at each other. Those mother effers knew I thought she was dead. My husband had been taking our infant twins to see her and I didn't know. I found it all out at once. It was so effing surreal.
My ex convinced me she was pregnant with my child and then lied about having a miscarriage. It ripped my heart out, and she played her lies expertly. Took me years to recover.
Have you had the displeasure of having an Edward Hamner in your life? Whether or not there was voodoo or dark magic involved, or just good old-fashioned gaslighting, leave a comment and tell us your tale of how you escaped the trap of malevolent manipulation. And as always, thank you for watching and listening to the Stephen King Book Club.